everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here. Janice and I always enjoy coming down to see all of you. Today I'd like to return to a topic I explored with you just about 3 years ago. I'm thinking about it again because of the likely transition of Reverend Marvin Harada to the Bishop of the Buddhist Churches of America. To what extent do we rely on our teacher? Are there limits? Let's consider that today. During services, we sometimes recite the Three Treasures text. In it, we proclaim our reliance on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Now, the first two treasures, the Buddha and Dharma, exist in the realm of ideas, and they are ever present. The timeless Sangha, well, we could say that's also an idea, but its embodiment is a contingent historical group of finite human beings, such as ourselves. What does it mean to take refuge in a Sangha? To help ground our understanding, I'm drawn to a passage from the Pali Suttas. As Gautama Buddha's life was drawing to a close, sorry about that. He instructed his disciples, "Therefore, Ananda, dwell, making yourselves your island, making yourselves, not anyone else, your refuge. Dwell, making the Dharma your island, the Dharma your refuge, nothing else your refuge." The expression used by Gautama is sometimes translated as "make of yourself a light." You may have heard it that way. The Pali word here is dipa, D-I-P-A. It could mean lamp or light, but in the context, the more likely meaning is island or support. I found this statement in a commentary. Samsara, that's our world of delusion, samsara is usually compared to an ocean. And what is required in the ocean for safety is an island, a solid land, and not a lamp. The Buddha's instruction was given in response to a question from his disciple Ananda, who was distraught over what would become of the community after the death of the Buddha. Surely, Ananda thought, a successor would have to be named. But Gautama refused to do so. He said, the Buddha said this, "If there is someone who thinks, quote, I shall take charge of the community, or the community should refer to me, well, let him make some statement about it, but I do not think in these terms." He offered the metaphor of an island, a bit of habitable ground in the midst of the ocean of birth and death, to explain how disciples should see themselves and the Dharma. The word Dharma refers to the teachings given by the Buddha. It also refers to what we might call limitless, formless reality, the refuge to which all the teachings are pointing. When Gautama speaks of taking refuge in yourself and in the Dharma, he means that we must make the Dharma so much a part of ourselves that we take refuge in both simultaneously. I think that marks an important change in us. In the Pali Suttas, this stage of discipleship is called stream entry. You might have heard the term. Stream enterers. What are stream enterers? They are men and women who carry out the Buddha's instructions, respond to his advice, have gone beyond doubt, become free from perplexity and fear, and have become independent of others in the teaching. That means internalizing the teachings and becoming, I think, secure enough to stand on your own 2 feet. Gautama explained stream entry in another way. He says, by realizing the Dharma for yourselves here and now through direct knowledge, you will soon enter and dwell in that supreme goal of the holy life. He's referring to nirvana, to enter and dwell into nirvana. No one, I think, can have the experience for us, this realizing, knowing, and dwelling. Now, our tradition of Shin Buddhism, we don't usually refer to the Pali Suttas, the texts I've been quoting, but we have something quite analogous to stream entry, the sense of having found the path despite our human frailty is called true settlement, or shinjin. It is to have gained lucid confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in the three treasures. The word lucid, well, lucid suggests that one's confidence is rational and clear-sighted. It is not blind faith. It is not mysticism. True settlement, according to Shinran, means that the fulfillment of our lives is certain to be realized even as we continue to live as foolish beings. The ideas that I'm sharing might seem jarring to Shin Buddhists. You might ask, well, Jim, what's this about making yourself your island and becoming independent of others? Aren't we liberated by the power beyond the self? That's one of our terms. Doesn't Shinran, founder of the tradition, teach us to abandon the mind of self-power? Well, I think that sometimes the pendulum of our understanding can swing too far in one direction and needs to be nudged back. The island metaphor from the Pali Suttas may be a useful corrective. If we can hear the teachings of Gautama and Shinran today, it is thanks to teachers and to the environment created by Vista Buddhist Temple, by the Buddhist Churches of America, and by Honganji in Japan. Nevertheless, relying on the Sangha has limits, I think. We cannot place ultimate reliance on contingent things, such as individuals and organizations. Ministers may retire or be reassigned. The temple and the BCA, if not for the continued efforts of many people, may cease to exist. Undoubtedly, that would be very upsetting. But I trust that our Dharma path would go forward in spite of adversity. This is one implication of making yourself your island, making the Dharma your island. The corollary is not to be overly reliant on one personal teacher. Shinran deflected that kind of attention away from himself. As an aside here, Janice and I attended a discussion group at another temple last week. The question arose as to whether a Buddhist follower could receive true settlement, or shinjin, in a sudden conversion experience under the guidance of a teacher. I've been told of such cases. It is an approach that may have been prevalent during an earlier era in Japan, but I think it is poorly suited to Americans in the 21st century, and it seems to be nothing like Shinran's own understanding of shinjin, which for him was a continual process of hearing the Dharma and reflecting on its meaning. Until the end of his life, he never ceased to hear and to reflect. Let's explore Shinran's experience a little further. I think was Hoanko 1 week ago? Recently, anyway, January, was the memorial service, annual memorial service for Shinran. So he's been in my thoughts for that reason. Let's explore his experience a little more. The manner in which we regard him should be guided by his own example. He did not take refuge in his teacher Honen, although he felt deep gratitude for what the teacher had conveyed to him. We just chanted saying, Hondoku-san, I will thank the masters and true teachers until my bones have turned to dust. That was his gratitude. But he did not take refuge in individuals. Therefore, We must not take refuge in Shinran, the finite human being. His whole life example argues against doing that. His role is to be the person who points us to the Dharma, but in regard to his fellow practicers, he disavowed any master-disciple relationship. As you may know, Honen and his Sangha courted controversy. They had adversaries in high places. After 6 years as Honen's student, Shinran was forcibly separated from his teacher and his Sangha when the community was crushed by the government. Shinran was banished from Kyoto to a life of hardship in rural Echigo, and he was cut off from the Sangha he had known. He was thrown back on his own resources. The 7 years he spent there in semi-isolation enabled him to find a new direction. I'll share with you some words from a commentary. With his exile and experience in Echigo, Shinran had begun to probe a dimension of Pure Land thought in which he could expect no further guidance from Honen. So what was that dimension? What did he discover during this time? Letting go of the final remnants of his monastic practice, he was a monk prior to meeting Honen, Shinran was. Shinran delved to the roots of religious life, reaching beyond the ordinary conceptions of wisdom and ignorance, moral rectitude and wrongdoing, into the fundamental nature of human existence as illuminated by the Buddha's wisdom. That is what he explored during these years. And I would say that if not for Shinran's Echigo experience, it's safe to say there would be no Shin Buddhism, and we would not be meeting here today. So that's why this history is important. This formative period in his life ended at age 41, kind of old by the standards of the day, but of course he lived to be 90. Although pardoned by the authorities, Shinran did not return to Kyoto at that time. Instead, he moved to the rural Kanto region, where he remained for 20 years. Shinran actively spread the teaching of Jodo Shinshu there and built a community of Shin Buddhists. He established meeting places called dojo. These were not considered to be temples because in those days, Shin Buddhism had no official standing and, of course, no ordained priests. In Shinran's actions, one can perceive, I think, an echo of the career of Gautama Buddha. You remember, a period spent in isolation, then awakening, culminating in the important decision to spread the teaching. For the rest of his long life, Shinran made himself and the Dharma his island, living, as he puts it, neither a priest nor a lay follower. He continued to listen deeply to the teachings through his reading and writing. He avoided institutions and remained visible only to a small community of fellow practicers. But in the centuries after his death, his influence was strongly felt. Again, a passage from a commentary. He was not a major factor in the public events of the times. Honen was that. He was a major actor, in the public events of the times. Shinran was not. Nevertheless, through his thought, he decisively altered the landscape of Japanese religious life. A more recent example of making yourself your island was Reverend Haya Akegarasu, a Shin teacher with a turbulent personal history. Akegarasu began as a conventional minister, and he might have remained so, but devastating experiences forced him to abandon his initial understanding. That was the beginning of his true appreciation of Jodo Shinshu. Having placed his reliance on the power beyond the self, as we put it, Akegarasu called himself a Doku Ritsusha, literally, an alone standing person, or as we might translate it, an independent person. A basic teaching of Buddhism is that all things are interdependent. You, I, the universe, well, nothing exists independently. So what does Sensei mean by Doku Ritsusha? Reverend Patty Nakai suggested to me that the alone standing person is neither controlling others nor being controlled by others. Here's another take on it from a commentary. The independent person lives a life that is severed from both the future and the past. He is not attached to the past, neither does he count on the future. Not attached to the past and not counting on the future. That is a good description of Shinran, as well as of Reverend Akegarasu. Such a person embodies the Buddha's instruction to make yourself your island. The alone standing person avoids becoming overly reliant on individuals and organizations, avoids a state of codependency. That type of over-reliance on specific things prevents us from seeing the interdependence of all things. I will close with verses from the Pali Suttas. This passage has to do with bhikkhus or monks, but I feel it can apply to us as well. One who is independent does not quake, but one who is dependent, clinging to things, does not transcend samsara with its becoming thus, becoming otherwise. Having known this danger, there is great peril in dependencies. Independent without clinging, a bhikkhu should wander mindfully. Namandavis.